Hey YouTubers, I want to show you a 7S Briggs off an old reel type mower. I prettied it up probably at least 30 years ago. Well, I'll tell you what year it was. It was in 85. 95, 05, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Well, yeah, back about 33 years ago, 34 years ago. But anyway, it's stuck sitting on the shelf. The shelf it sits on up there, it went on the very end down to the left of that black Briggs & Stratton with the float carburetor. There's dampness. It's right in under the front porch, kind of under the foyer. And this basement does have water issues. Doesn't really matter because it's not finished. But with the floor damp all the time and getting dried out, moisture has stuck it in the piston. The reason I know that, I can barely rock the crank. Just a tiny little bit of play in the rod, which is minuscule because the motor was like new. And it's the fancy one with the air deflector that, or air funnel that takes air up over the head, as well as just the taller shroud and the 7 fins on the 7 cooling fins. So I'm going to pull the head off and figure out what's ailing it. I feel pretty sure it's the piston and not, I know it's not just a valve because it doesn't turn at all, just a tiny bit of play. So I'm going to turn the video off for a minute and keep from boring you to tears. Okay, it is rust in the cylinder. And I know why, and it's my fault, and I did what I tell people they shouldn't do. And since then, I've changed my way of looking at things. I was starting them every once in a while on carb cleaner. The little bit of, or starting fluid, there's no oil in it. That's the biggest farce when they say, oh, it has lubricant in it. It's got such a minuscule amount, it's not really doing you any good. So basically what I've done, I've dried it out. But that is very slight. You can't feel the rust. You can see the discoloration. You can see where the rings have stopped before. Different times when I started it for just a second on carb cleaner. So really, the one might think, well, you're going to have to sand that out first, and do this and do that. In reality, it's as smooth as glass. Not looking at it, you wouldn't know there's a thing. In fact, I can get greasy, oily residue off of it. It's the color that's going to throw people a curve. But from doing this so many years, I know it's not a big deal. I'm going to give it the old PB blaster, just the tiniest little bit. If you don't want to break loose real easy, I ain't forcing it. I'm not going to break a ring or a ring land. Let's see. What some people will do is put a Christmas tree timer. If they got a motor stuck real bad, they'll take a Christmas tree timer and a trouble light. Fill a cylinder full of oil. Hook the Christmas tree timer to the trouble light and hang it on the motor, or a floodlight actually, and have it come on and off and on and off and on and off as many times as, like, every half hour. So it heats up and cools down, heats up and cools down. Well, the aluminum piston against the cast iron block are expanding and contracting at different rates, which allows for movement, which allows that PB blaster to wick its way down in around the ring lands and down on the skirt. And you don't have to worry about getting in a hurry, forcing it, and breaking the ring land. I say all these things flashing back to when I was a kid and in a hurry and didn't know my butt from a hole in the ground. Let me get a pair of big channel locks here. Like I said, if this don't move real easy, I'm not screwing with it. I'll go a different route. But I got a feeling. I know it wasn't stuck 5 years ago because I rocked them all. And I try to stop them on the compression stroke with both valves closed, just for that very reason, so it won't build up any more rust than possible. Let me see if I can do this with one hand without skinning up my paint. Oh yeah, it's just barely was stuck. I mean, barely. I didn't put no more pressure. I probably could have done it by hand, but I'm not that strong, and I ain't gonna hurt my wrist trying to force it. Oh, let's sit down here. I had her all glammed up. Yes, he's turning over good. Had her all glammed up and looking good. and put away. But like I said, I started it on cleaner. Only reason them fins are rusty, when I painted the motor, I had the plate with the numbers there all on it. This one's got the aluminum wall pan, and up on the head, I'll drag this over here and show you. Up on the head, it's got this one tall spacer. That was that spacer I put in there so I could still use the same bolt. It had a vertical pillar with a horizontal tab sticking off of it with about a 5/16, maybe as much as a 3/8 hole in it, that went to a stabilizer bar to the handlebar of the real tight mower that it was on. In other words, the motor kept the handles from flopping around. And I still have that little tab somewhere I saw just the other day when I was rooting through a box of crap. But, all right, we've seen that. I'm going to turn it off again, clean it, wipe it out, make sure both valves, well, let's see right now. If both valves open and still closed, which they do, so it didn't get to the guides. It just stuck the piston in its bore, and that's because it's so daggone clean. There is absolutely no ridge, no nothing. Just a minuscule little layer of rust. See that, Ollie? That's nothing. Okay, I'm going to turn it off and see if we got fire and stick it back together and make it start up. While we're at it, let's see if the points have turned green and messed up on the spark. That's going to be kind of hard to do, to hold this and not turn my motor over. I got a poor man's tester I made out of a little old clamp and a good plug. Let's see if we see a spark at the gap here. I could hear it, but I couldn't see it. I'll set the phone down for a second. Rewrap my rope. Yeah, this ain't really the ideal. I got a good fixture, but get my camera. Oh yeah, we got fire. Gobs of it. Okay, I'll stick the head back on. I'll be right back. Okay. Filming again. And let me stick this back in the little fixture. Tip that back just a smidge. I squirted some flammable down in it with all the oil that I done put in it. Let's see, turn that air filter up so it won't fall over. And put the choke about 4/5 of the way on so it'll draw a little air, but it'll have to. I wanted to draw some air with the. Just a little. Compression ain't up because the rings are a little bit rusty and the valves haven't been sealed in God knows when. Spark, I would think it's okay. Let me open the throttle just a hair, close the air off. We may not hear it run without doing a motor start, but I don't want to. Find out. All right. I believe we got too much oil in it. Oh shit. I mean poop. I mean daggone. Let me stop filming for a minute and fix my rope. Hang on, folks. Okay, I got the sucker tube cleaned out. Took the plug out and dried it. It had the oil from where I lubed it up all over the plug. And I'm not going to put the tank on and run it with the tank because I don't want to have gas down here. But you'll get the picture if it doesn't make a fool of me. I ain't going to crank myself to death. There, we got her. If I can make it burn that little bit out, there'll be a little bit of oiliness still in it because of what I put down in around the piston. Oh, damn it. smacked me right in the stomach. Let's see. You heard it pop and hit a few rounds. Damn it. It's going real good sitting down, that's for sure. Guess I had it too wet. It's possible, a little 2-inch piston, there ain't a whole lot of room. Good enough. I'll clean her all up, put it back on the shelf, and it'll look good. I saw something while I was getting a tool over here I want to tell you about. My old 318 Dodge give out. Piston broke. All the rings were broke up from running way too hot and a little too advanced. So I bought a car motor. I had a Canadian POLYSPHERE motor in it. I bought a car motor, got ready to put it in. The crankshaft pattern was different where it bolted to the flywheel. Everything about it was different. People tell you a cast iron POLYSPHERE is the same as a cast iron POLYSPHERE. Not true. This piece of paper, so I went to put in the bolts and all the holes was gone by Johnny Cash. That's the pattern on my Canadian POLYSPHERE. It dipped back in behind the bell housing, dipped back in behind the flywheel, and you had to take the flywheel off of the engine before you could put the engine up to the bell housing. The modern poly car motor wasn't like that. You could pull a motor out of a car, which was done on the motor that I ended up using, leave a transmission in the car, no big deal. You can't do that with a POLYSPHERE Canadian industrial motor for a standard shift unless you can break a flywheel in two. So what I did after I had to change the crankshafts in the motor, here's what I did. I rubbed this piece of, these are manila folders. I rubbed them on the back of the block of the donor motor. I rubbed them on the back of the block of the old wore out motor with the bad piston. Scorching hot, miserable, in the middle of the night. Been out there all day with a piece of cardboard C-clamp to my tripod to keep the sun off my back. Made me a little template out of the grease off of both motors, stacked them on top of each other, cut my holes, drilled them by hand. Everybody says, oh, you can't do that. You can't work. Why, it's way more precise than that. Bull poopy. I did it. I worked it. I lived it. I made money with it, and I just sold it a couple years ago. Hand drilled, crank out of one motor, put in the other. See the difference in the bolt patterns? The top 5 were the same, but the industrial motor, the Canadian motor, had ribs in the back of it to strengthen it because it was a work mule. The car motor was the sissy model comparatively, but they still ain't no slouches. 318 early long stroke motors are some working mules, but I like the first motor's lugging power better. But I took the cranking bearings out of one motor, used, put them in the other motor, thinking, well, it'll probably hold up for a few loads. I worked it 5 or 6 years that way. Gobs of loads. I can't tell you how many. And it's still working. The guy that's got it owns a roofing company. And he's thrilled with it. And the car motor had new rings and stuff and hardened valve seats, so it really worked out pretty darn good and didn't use any oil and didn't knock. But anyway, that's about enough of that. Well, that's a cute little old motor, and she runs good. I'm going to put it back on the shelf after I wipe it down and clean the tank out and oil the tank. And it'll be another for Barbie to sell when I'm long gone if I go before she does. Not trying to be morbid, but that's the reality of it. John Wade on YouTube. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.